And everybody to another Saturday edition of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We are a mere 5 days away from the start of the WCC tournament, 15 days away from Selection Sunday, 19 days away from the start of the first round of the NCAA tournament, which means March has finally arrived. We have one final day of the WCC regular season, and obviously going to dive into all of that. But this is for my personal sports calendar, the best calendar month of the year. Obviously, for college basketball, do have spring training baseball, that crossover. Those are my two favorite sports. So this is an awesome time of year, and there's plenty left to decide these next on this last day of the WCC schedule, and a lot of implications of what we're going to see in Las Vegas in just a few days. So the Saturday slate got we have Portland at San Diego at 2, Santa Clara at Pacific at 5, Washington State at Pepperdine at 7, Oregon State at St. Mary's later tonight, and then the big one, Gonzaga at San Francisco at the Chase Center. All a ton of implications for all of these. Really, only a couple of seeds have been decided uh, at this stage. So let's get right into it, and we're gonna start with the Zags and the Dons, which will be a battle for sole possession of second place and that triple that triple bye all the way to the semifinals of the WCC tournament, which would be on Monday of the tournament. So just I think that is now 9 days from now is when this team would start. The loser obviously would then slide into that quarterfinal matchup, which would start on Sunday. WCC tournament no longer has that off day on Sunday, so it will be a full every day of basketball from Thursday to the following Tuesday. That is the run of the WCC tournament. The first matchup being on Thursday, that's that 10-11 game. But for Zags and Dons, this is going to be for second place. And both of these teams had some interesting games on Thursday or earlier this week. Gonzaga took on Santa Clara on Tuesday earlier on in the week, and the Zags won that one 95-76. And this one took on kind of almost a very similar look of what we have seen maybe some of the USF games take on against Gonzaga. Very competitive in the first half, and then the Zags really ran away with it in the second. Santa Clara came into this one red hot, having hit 23 threes against Washington State on Saturday, and looked like they hadn't cooled off. They hit their first 8 against Santa Clara against Gonzaga in the first half, and it looked like we were going to just see more and more of the same. Graham Ike got in foul trouble, and Braden Huff got in foul trouble. It looked like we might start to see Santa Clara be able to pull away, but the Zags closed the half on a 10-0 run. And really, one of the turning points in that game was the insertion of uh, Ismaila Diane coming off the bench. The Zags' third string center, the 7-footer. His size, his length really changed the entire outlook for this contest. He was 4 for 4 from the field, 9 points, 4 rebounds, a block, a steal in 19 minutes, and really, it's like he just changed the equation for what Santa Clara was trying to do, because this is someone in Diane who is a legitimate shot blocker. This is someone who is been very haven't obviously seen him much at all season long, and he came through in a very critical time, a very critical moment for Gonzaga on Tuesday. Gonzaga had a 56-20 advantage in the paint, and the second half we've seen Gonzaga's defense rev up in the latter half of games. We saw it again against Santa Clara. They allowed the Broncos only to shoot 37% from the field. And even after that onslaught at the beginning, Santa Clara hitting those first 8 3-pointers. After that, they were 3 for 17 from distance. So very clear, like flip of the script in that one. And also just the running away with that in the second half. Ryan Hemard, he had a career high 15 assists, which now gives him a total of 295. He passed Emmett Nar to set the WCC single season record for assists, which obviously is a an incredible number to get to, especially considering we still have the Zags have at least 3 more games left. The game tonight, one in the WCC tournament, and then at least one at this stage in the postseason somewhere. Obviously, it's going to be it's still largely the NCAA tournament. I think it would have to be some sort of massive collapse or oversight if the Zags somehow still don't get in, even if they were to lose out between now and Selection Sunday. I still just don't see how they miss the tournament at this point. But the Zags came through in a critical moment. They were coming off the loss against St. Mary's at the Kennel. They needed this game to go into USF with the potential of having the outright second seed. Because again, if the Dons and Zags had tied at any point, it would have been actually looking at the fact that USF has the game against St. Mary's as kind of a little bit of a tiebreaker there. So it was critical for them to get that game to set themselves up for Saturday. And looking at USF and what they were able to do on Thursday night, they were at Oregon State, a place that is really tough to play in. The Beavers were 15-2 going into that one, and this one really was it was a really fun game to watch. 8 ties, 14 lead changes. USF did end up winning at 74-72. Venabosi hitting a game-winning three-pointer with 4.4 seconds left, which gave USF the win at Oregon State, which is only their third home loss of the season. The other two are St. Mary's and Oregon, so the Dons in pretty good company there. Marcus Williams had 21, and one of the keys in this one was that USF was in foul trouble with their big men. Carlton Lingard was in foul trouble. You also had they had to actually dive deeper and deeper into their bench. James O'Donnell also was in foul trouble, and they had to go all the way to Saba Gigiberia to really kind of fill in that role. And he did a great job in his 17 minutes, 10.7 rebounds in that one. And it was also because Parsifalo was having a really good game for Oregon State. He was 11 for 13 from the field. He had 24 points. He really was an automatic bucket out there and got the USF front court in foul trouble early on in that contest, forcing them to go to Gigi Barea very early on. But he played well. He came through when they needed him. Marcus Williams having a really good game. The Dons were able to pull this one out. They set themselves up to stay even with the Zags going into this one on later on tonight. And looking at what we're going to see between these two. Now, the matchup has been in the win-loss column largely one-sided for just about a decade. It has been a long, long time since USF has been able to beat Gonzaga. It hasn't happened since 2012. And these two, when they faced each other just a couple weeks ago, Gonzaga did win at the Kennel 88-77. This was a game like many of the others. USF was competitive in the first half, had a fairly good lead. I think it was like 6-7 points in that first half, but Gonzaga charged late to close the half to get that to an even score at halftime, and then ran away with it in the second. And we've just continued to see this happen time and time again in this matchup. And Ryan Nembhard had 18 points, 13 assists. The combination of Graham Ike and Braden Huff had 30 points, 13 for 21 from the field. Ryan Beasley had a good game and really kind of made at least it interesting late in the contest. The Dons did have a late charge and got it into single digits. And Beasley had 16 in that one. But they need to figure out the Dons, if they're going to overtake the Zags in this one, they're going to need to figure some things out. Largely, it's how do we handle the front court of Gonzaga? How do you handle Ike and Huff? How do you stay out of foul trouble? I don't know how much of Diane we're going to see in this one. Obviously, he played very well the other night, but I'm not quite sure that means we're going to see him on a regular basis because in this matchup, Ike Huff have done very well. And it really hasn't been much of an issue for the Zags at this point. Huff and Ek having their way, it's like it really is about Lingard, Abosi, O'Donnell, uh, Wong trying to figure out a way to either limit their touches or just keeping them out the paint, which is obviously a lot easier said than done. Graham Eke is maybe the most efficient player in the conference. And once he catches it deep, we have seen that he is near automatic inside the paint. Braden Huff can be the same way. Obviously, he can stretch you out a little bit more to the perimeter. But that combination of those two has been a constant matchup problem for the Dons. And they're going to need to at least figure out a way to slow those two down. I don't know if it's you try to run a bit more of a zone defense because clearly playing one-on-one against that pairing has not really worked out all that well. But you also need the battle up. Caleb Battle. Caleb Battle has also played. He's had obviously his good games. He's as explosive as a lot of the Zags go, but we've also seen him have these droughts, and he had one of them against USF in the first matchup. So USF has done a good job against him, but they also need to make sure that remains the case. He's the type of guy, a lot like Nolan Hickman, that if they have good games, the Zags will run away with contests. You need to make sure that they're in check. You need to make sure that you're playing enough defense on those guys to really kind of force them into bad shots, which the Dons have been able to do, and they're one of the better 3-point defensive teams in the conference. And for USF, they also need somebody on looking at the other side. They're going to need somebody other than the backcourt to be a threat. Malik Thomas had a good game. Ryan Beasley had a good game the last time out. Marcus Williams fell flat in that game. He was 2 for 12 from the field. But they're going to need someone other than that grouping to show out. They're going to need, I think, a Carlton Lingard to step up in these moments. They're going to need a Barry Wong to step up in these moments because it just can't be the backcourt. Unfortunately for USF, when the backcourt has had to carry the heaviest of loads, like they tend to do against Gonzaga, they fall short in these games. And there's just not that balance to this offense, and it makes them to an extent one-dimensional in what they're able to accomplish. I mean, Gonzaga, you think about what Gonzaga did in the last game. They had a 41-28 advantage on the boards. And that plays a lot into that mismatch I talk about of what Gonzaga does well and what USF has not done well against this squad. And they also, and in addition to the rebounding, they also are going to have to be able to shoot the three well. Again, they might be one-dimensional, but I think it's more likely that we're going to see the continued dominance inside for Gonzaga. So if that's going to be the case, you're going to need to be able to shoot the three well. And that to me feels like, okay, I know I'm likely to get it from Malik Thomas. I'm going to get it from Williams. I'm going to get it from Beasley. I might need it from Tyrone Riley as well. And I don't think he played particularly well in that first matchup. I thought that there was not necessarily like the deer in the headlights for Riley because he's been very good all year long. But I think it's one of those scenarios where maybe getting a little bit more comfortable against a squad like Gonzaga. And in round 2 at Chase Center, where, again, the Dons have played a couple times before. It's not like this is a new venue for them. I do think that he could play maybe one of those roles in a bigger way. He had some good moments against Oregon State. We've seen him have some big nights throughout the course of the year. Arguably, he's going to be he's on the short list for freshman of the year in the WCC. So that's someone I would also look at as being maybe one of the keys in the match if it's going to flip the USF way. Now for Gonzaga, it really just feels in this one, do what you've done kind of all year long, because this matchup with USF has been very, very one-sided. And as good as USF has been, they just run into the constant problem of the Zags' size and their efficiency. Ryan Nemhard is, again, he had 13 assists in the last matchup. He had 15 assists just the other night. He is he is going to just pick this team apart if they don't make it a more challenging game on him. They're going to continue to pound inside with both EK and Braden Huff as those two switch in and out. And maybe you just try for Gonzaga. It feels like the game plan is already there. I don't think there's much change that they need to have. If anything else, it's the defense in the first half against Santa Clara was a little suspect, and that's something that they could improve upon. And that's what they can do better against USF. It's take that 3-point shot away and force them into the paint, force them to do something else than what they're comfortable doing, and maybe even speed them up a bit. I know we talk a lot about how USF seems like the team that will play faster or whatnot, but they don't play at the Zag speed. And USF is also a team that's actually pretty comfortable playing at a slower pace. They not obviously not quite to the slow pace that St. Mary's or Oregon State would play, but that is a team that is pretty comfortable playing a little bit slower, a little bit more deliberate. So if the Zags can speed them up and force them into transition a little bit more often, I do think that that also plays an advantage for the Zags. Now, the implications of this game, matchup aside, the Zags are in a very familiar yet strange position. Since the WCC tournament has moved to Las Vegas in 2009, the Zags have been one of the top 2 seeds every year in the WCC tournament. Since it has moved to Las Vegas, USF has never been one of the top 2 seeds in the WCC tournament. And for both of them, it would be a strain. Obviously, for USF, if they were to win this game, it would be an exciting opportunity for them because then they get to be the 2 seed going into Vegas all the way to the semis. That's one fewer game that they will have to play, albeit they'd probably have to play Gonzaga again because Gonzaga would be the 3 seed. But having that one fewer game, having that extra time to rest and prep for a team you like, the team you likely know that you will see, has a lot of benefit to being in that spot. Uh, I think it also puts USF in greater position as a potential at-large team if they were to get the game on Saturday. And let's say USF were to get the game on in the semis against Gonzaga. Let's say they somehow beat Gonzaga twice in a row. I do think that's unlikely, but for the argument's sake, let's say it happens. They go into game tonight. They win at Chase Center. They go into Vegas, wait in the semis. Gonzaga gets beaten down a little bit in that quarterfinal game against whether it's LMU, Washington State, whoever it is. And USF is able to take advantage in that semifinal game and get the win. But then maybe lose in the title game to St. Mary's. Is that enough to get them into the NCAA tournament? I did ask one bracketologist that question of if that were to happen, if USF were to beat them twice, get to the WCC final, is that enough to get USF an at-large bid? And the answer was yes. They would be in. And for USF, obviously they were in the tournament back in 2021. It's been a few years since they reached the NCAA tournament. Then they have at least a little bit of that resume already put together. 23-7 going into tonight. There's 60 in the net, 1-4 in quad 1, 3-3 in quad 2. But they're 18-0 against quad 3 and quad 4. They have no bad losses. And if they were to pick up the next 2, which would both count as quad 1 victories, now you're looking at a team that is 3-4 in quad 1, that is 6-7 overall in quad 1, quad 2. That's going to be pretty comparable to a lot of other teams that are going to be on the bubble or in that range, if not a little bit better. And again, they don't have the bad loss. So there is a massive opportunity for USF tonight, and then also going into what we will see in the WCC tournament if they are to be the 2 seed. Obviously, if they don't win tonight and they are the 3 seed going into Vegas, things get a little shakier on that front. That's the scenario where I think they would probably have to win out and win the WCC tournament to get in. But keeping this close, keeping in the game in this one, I do think like for tournament's sake, got to get this one. Got to get to the semifinal. I think that's a baseline for USF to do. And if they're able to do that, Vegas is going to be a lot more fun to see if they can accomplish what many believe, obviously, and everyone in the USF campus thinks they are capable of doing. This team has been so good all year long, and now we're at the point where now you have to really prove it. Now, on the flip side, for Gonzaga, what if they were to lose those next 2 games? I asked the same question of like, well, Gonzaga's kind of been a little shaky all year long, and it's now obviously shaky in the sense of they haven't been able to pull out these close wins. Their resume doesn't show a ton of great quad 1A quality wins. Like they've fallen short in a lot of these opportunities. And in the scenario, if they were to lose those 2, that would give Gonzaga 10 losses. And obviously, it's been a very long time since Gonzaga has had 10 losses in a single season. So what would that do to their scenario, their situation on Selection Sunday? Are they in? Asking that same question, I got a yes, they're in, but barely. They would probably be one of those first 4 teams in. So they would have to do the Dayton trip and do all that. If they were to lose the next 2, which likely both would be USF, or sorry, if they were to lose 2 of the next 3, I should say, lose USF on Saturday, win the quarterfinal game, and then lose again to USF in the semis of the WCC tournament. Now, lose in the quarterfinals to either Washington State or LMU, who is likely the opponent, could be Portland as well. If you lose that game, then we might be talking about them being left out the tournament altogether. But if they were to go loss, win, loss the next 3, they're still in there, but it's going to be very, very shaky. And probably a little bit of nervous energy going into Selection Sunday for the Zags. Now on the flip side, if Gonzaga gets the game tonight, which if I'm looking at this, if I'm thinking about this matchup, thinking about what we've seen in the past, they're going to get is a scenario where the Zags will set themselves up to potentially get back to the WCC title game, which they have not missed since it has moved to Las Vegas, and a scenario to at least build up the resume a tiny bit more. I mean, a lot of brackets still have them somewhere in that 9 seed range. So I think they're probably going to end up all along the 8-9 line. I don't think there's enough left on the schedule to really bump them up that much more. USF would not really kind of move the needle as much as a lot might think. But a win against St. Mary's would, if they were to win the WCC tournament, be the auto bid, and that could maybe bump them back up to a 7 seed if that were to be the scenario, if they were to win out. So that would be winning the next 3 games. The Zags could probably still, I think, squeak into a 7 seed for the NCAA tournament. So now we have the 3-4 seeds, which are also still up, I should say the 4-5 seeds, which are still up for grabs. Gonzaga and USF are fighting for 2 and 3. 4 and 5, Oregon State and Santa Clara. Right now, the 4 belongs to the Broncos, and the 5 is Oregon State. And this is a critical scenario because the 4 seed gets to have that bye into the quarters, and the 5 seed will have to play in that 3rd round. And yes, Oregon State, despite maybe some of the things that have happened to them, are still alive in this scenario. And here's kind of the scenarios work out. So Oregon State is going to be playing at St. Mary's. Santa Clara is going to be playing at Pacific. For Santa Clara, it becomes very simple for the 4 seed. Win and you're the 4 seed. That's it. But it also can happen if Oregon State loses. So they have two different scenarios in which they will just hold on to the 4 seed. I do think that scenario one is the one that will happen first. And if I'm looking, let me think about the times of the games correctly. Yeah, it's like Santa Clara could already know that they are locked in at the 4 seed before Oregon State ever plays. Or Oregon State is going to know whether or not they can even have a chance at the 4 seed before they even start their game against St. Mary's. But there are a few other scenarios. I mean, Oregon State, yes, still does have a chance to get up to that 4 seed. Uh, so they have to have a few things happen. So three things have to happen for that to be the case. Oregon State obviously has to beat St. Mary's. Santa Clara has to lose to Pacific, and Gonzaga has to beat USF to create the tiebreaker uh, because of USF's sweep against Oregon State. They can't have that. So they need that to kind of be the order going in. And that's really the only scenario that they can end up with the 4. Really, like this is Santa Clara's to lose, Santa Clara's to end up with. 4-5 seems pretty simple to me. 4 will be Santa Clara. Oregon State will be the 5. Also because I'm asking Oregon State to go on the road and beat St. Mary's and Moraga on senior night, especially when that last matchup didn't go well for the Beavers. They lost the one in Corvallis 63-49, and it didn't even seem that close. This was like the first real introduction to the double big lineup of Harry Wessels and Mitchell Saxon. And that group held Michael Rattide to a season low 3 points. Parsafala was 3 for 9 from the field. It was all bad for Oregon State on that night. They'll need big nights from both of them if they do hope to actually get going in that. But also they're going to need shoot better from 3. They were 4 for 14 in the first matchup against St. Mary's, and yes, St. Mary's is a very good defensive team against 3-point shooting. But again, like you have to check off a number of the boxes to do things well against the Gales to be able to pull off an upset, especially at home. Oregon State's capable, but we've also seen Oregon State just be a very, very different team away from Gill Coliseum, especially in true road games. Paulos Morauskas also barely played in that game. I mentioned the double big lineup early, but that came up because Morauskas got hurt within the first minute of the game. Hardaway picked up 2 quick fouls, and they needed to dive deeper into the bench and use another rotation. And that's how we ended up with Saxon and Wessels for a large chunk of that game. So thinking about the number of things that have to go the way for Oregon State, I just don't have a ton of confidence that the Beavers can pull this off. But obviously there is that chance if Rattide has a great night, Fala has a good night, they get maybe some of the bigs in foul trouble this time around. Getting Mitchell Saxon off the floor would probably be a great thing for them. They'll stand the chance to pull an upset in this one and spoil senior night for St. Mary's, especially with St. Mary's coming off an ugly game against LMU. The offense just was not there the other night at Gersten Pavilion. They did win 58-55, but neither team could get the offense going. It really makes me wonder if like there's something just weird about that building because no one has shot well there. Even LMU, like Santa Clara didn't shoot well there. Oregon State didn't shoot well. St. Mary's didn't shoot well there. It really is just been a house of horrors for any good offensive team walking into that building. But now with the season over, no one actually has to go back in there, so we won't see any of these ugly offensive games at LMU. And I think that might be more the reason I think St. Mary's will be refocused in this matchup because of what we saw the other night, because it wasn't pretty. We didn't see the normal games out of a Mitchell Saxon or a Gustas Marshallonis or a Mikey Lewis. It was just a bad offensive night overall. Obviously, they still only allowed 55 points, so the defense was fine. But the offense needs to pick it back up against Oregon State to be able to finish off strong for the regular season. And if any hope of Santa Clara Pacific, I mean, Pacific has had its moments. Obviously, beating Washington State twice is a huge deal, but Santa Clara won the last game 83-49. This was a wildly one-sided game. Santa Clara's overall been playing pretty well, even though they lost the other night against Gonzaga. On but on the road against Pacific is can be tough. That building can be a tough place to play. But if Santa Clara plays the way we've seen them play, even against Gonzaga, over the last few weeks, this should be a game that the Broncos take care of pretty handily. And now, what about 6, 7, and 8? Because we're not done. The 6, 7, 8 window is also fairly critical. That's really that 6 seed, the last of the true buys. That 6 seed is very important when you think about where teams are going to land. 6 seed. Now, the 6 seed could end up playing Gonzaga in that first matchup, or they could end up seeing USF in that first matchup. Uh, so time, well, obviously, like second game if they were to actually um, win their first game, likely against the 7 or 10 seed. But this 6, 7, 8 gives you one more day of rest. This game would start if you're a 6, you're going to start on Saturday, and if you're 7 or 8, you're going to be starting on Friday. So again, you don't want to have to start on Friday night in the WCC tournament and give yourself uh, much more of a hurdle to get to deeper and deeper into this tournament. LMU, who is sitting at the 6th seed, 8-10, they are idle. They are done with the regular season, and they are one game up on Washington State and Portland, or half game up on the two of them. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen with both of those squads. Wazoo is at Pepperdine. Portland is going to be on the road at San Diego. And Portland has been really, really hot the last month or so. They won the other night against Pepperdine 86-67. Portland scored 54 points in the second half of that one. They went 5-2 in the month of February. They're which pushed them into that tie with Washington State, as Washington State really was in free fall mode most of the month. In each of the 5 wins, they've scored 80 plus points. And what we've also started to see is kind of the reemergence of Chris Austin. He's reached double figures in 10 of the last 11 games, including 20 or more in 4 of those contests. So this is a team that's going to wrap up with San Diego, a San Diego team that they should be able to handle. Even if they're on the road at Jenny Craig Pavilion, this Portland team has been playing too well and has been beating up on the teams in that lower tier of the conference. They've done it well. So I would expect Portland to probably pick up that win. And then Wazoo at Pepperdine, that one, Wazoo won the game against Pepperdine a couple weeks ago, but it was by 1. And honestly, Pepperdine should have won that game. And just the other night, Wazoo led by 18 at the half against San Diego, and before letting them score 61 points in the second half. And yes, Wazoo still held on. It was 93-86 in that one, but the turnover problems came back again. 23 turnovers for the Cougs in that one, which resulted in 30 points for the Toreros. Even though they still shot 59% from the field, like this Washington State team is maddening. They are so good on the offensive end, but they continue to let teams back in and shoot themselves in the foot with all of these turnovers. And it's for a team that is as talented as they are, to see that be the constant problem, the constant issue is, I would be so frustrated if I were a Cougs fan watching this team, because this is a squad that really should be scratching the surface of like the top three seeds in this league, not a team that is now fighting for its life down in the 6, 7, 8 seed range. All that said, Wazoo is the one that has its own fate kind of in its hands. If Wazoo wins, they are the 6th seed. They'll leapfrog LMU because they do hold the tiebreaker. If Portland wins, Washington State loses, it becomes a little bit more of an interesting dynamic. it doesn't seem quite clear on who would actually hold the tiebreaker between Portland and LMU. A lot of them have very similar wins. So that's one there. But if Wazoo loses, Portland wins, Wazoo will end up the 8th seed in the WCC tournament, and a first go round in the WCC. Obviously, not a good look for this former Pac-12 team, future Pac-12 team, all that. A team that has been decimated by injuries, but even so, has continued to just not doom itself with the number of turnovers that they've had all season long. All right. March is finally here. We have all those great slate of games going into this one. I'll just add like a couple more notes, like St. Mary's related notes at the very end here. Obviously, the player awards are going to come out early next week. And so we will know who's going to be the player of the year, the DPOI, all those sorts of things. I do want to like throw the one note out here before closing. If Augustus Barcelonas does end up winning player of the year, he'll be the 15th player ever to win it multiple times in his career. If Mitchell Saxon, which I do think this will happen, if he wins his second consecutive defensive player of the year, he'll be the first since 2008, 2009, when maybe my personal favorite Gale, Diamond Simpson, won it twice in those last 2 years in Moraga. All right, so that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along on social media at Post by Zach and at Unofficial WCC Pod. One more day of the regular season, and then we are on to Las Vegas for the WCC tournament starting on Thursday, which will be a ton of fun. I'll be making the trip down there. I'll be there present for the semis and the finals the following week. So if any of you are making the trip, it'll be great to see all y'all out in Las Vegas. All right, well, that'll do it. And I will catch you later.